Welcome back to the channel. Today, guys, we're going to be discussing 5 tips that's going to help you make your iPhone footage look way more cinematic. The reason I decided to make this video is because I know in today's world, things are very expensive, and a lot of people just don't have access to the budgets or the resources that most filmmakers do to have the gear that they got. And that's where a lot of the confusion comes from, because there's so much gear out there today. It's kind of confusing trying to figure out what you want versus what you actually need. And I'm here to tell you, because of so much technological advancements, you can use something as simple as an iPhone, specifically the 15, 16 going forward, to get some incredible results. And I'm going to give you some of those tips right now to help you get the most cinematic footage. So if you took a look at my Instagram and how my page kind of blew up in the past 6 months, a lot of it's actually just done on my iPhone. And I have a Sony FX6 and a Sony a7S III, and I rarely take them out to do the majority of the content I'm doing unless it's really for client work. So this video specifically is for those people that are guerrilla filmmakers, the people that don't have access to a lot of that gear, but can use what they have in their hand, which is a cell phone that everyone's got, to get the best footage possible. So I'm going to start with tip number 1, and that's shoot in Apple Log. The reason that this is beneficial is because it gives you the maximum amount of dynamic range and flexibility in post-production for color grading. And anyone in filmmaking knows this is one of the most important aspects of recording and knowing exactly how to do it, which goes into the second tip, part of number 1, and that's expose your footage correctly. Expose a little higher inside of the shadows just to make sure that you avoid the amount of noise that you get in your footage. And the reason that this happens is because there's a smaller sensor on the phone, as opposed to when you're using DSLRs or mirrorless cameras that have larger sensors. It makes it more sensitive to light, which introduces a lot more noise into your footage. The iPhone, especially in daylight or controlled lighting situations, can produce really similar results to a lot of cameras that you see inside of the market right now, but knowing its limitations and also attributing that to what you're capable of is just as important. And you could use tools like Zebras or the histogram to try and check where your exposure is to make sure that you're not blowing out your highlights or the shadows aren't too dark. Here's a pro tip for you. Download the Blackmagic camera app. This thing is incredible, and it allows for you to do things that you could never do in the native settings on your iPhone. Tip number 2 would have to be like stabilization and camera movement. I mean, this is so important because when you're filming on a phone, you don't have any real weight attributed to it, so it can make it look very shaky and jittery. So if you use something like the DJI Osmo and other cool little gimbals like that are made specifically for phones, it'll help you a lot with making your footage look a lot more stable and professional. And another thing overlooked a lot is use a tripod. A lot of people think that you need movement in all your shots when you really don't. Movement is necessary when you're trying to do something for a reason. If you move the camera too much, it kind of loses the meaning behind why you're actually trying to do that in the frame. And I guess a good tip for keeping it stable would be tucking your elbows closer to your body and putting both hands on each side of the camera to make sure that you keep it as stable as possible. And this helps eliminate a lot of the shake that happens naturally if you just have your arms extended and you're not really balancing or stabilizing the shot at all. And whenever you're trying to make movements, make sure there's slow and intentional movements. You don't need to do all these dramatic movements all the time. There is a reason why composition matters so much inside of filmmaking, and that's something that we're going to touch on. Number 3 would have to be composition and framing. Composition has a bigger cinematic impact than the camera or the sensor. I don't care what anyone says. You can find somebody with a subpar device that understands exactly how to compose a shot, and they will get a better result every single time. So it's not really the camera, it's the person, and it's not really the car, it's the driver, if you catch my drift. Composition also has a lot to do with the lens choices that you use. And when you're using something like the iPhone 15, the great thing is it has 3 different lenses inside of it. And on the iPhone 15, the reason this is really convenient is because it's like carrying 3 lenses in one body, versus when I have my DSLRs, or if I have my mirrorless, or even my cinema camera, I have to carry around a bunch of hefty lenses and switch them all the time, which can be inconvenient. And when you're on the go and you're moving around, having a phone like this with this capabilities makes it extremely convenient for you to get a really premium, professional looking result without having to pull out a whole camera. So as I said, understanding what the limitations are and the capabilities of the camera is what can enable you to get some really good footage. And composing it properly using the iPhone and the tools it has is very possible. You just need to know what you're doing. And it's not something that you're just going to learn the first time you do, but as you keep repeating it, because repetition is the father of learning, you're going to start identifying the mistakes you're making and then understanding how to correct them. And after a while, that just becomes second nature and you'll know what to do in every situation. Number 4 would have to be lighting control. The reason this matters specifically on an iPhone 15s or whatever it is in general is because smaller sensors means that it's more sensitive to light. And if you want to retain more detail or have a better image, you want to make sure that you have access to as much light as possible. And I know as a guerrilla filmmaker, this could be difficult because you step into environments or situations where you just don't know really what you're going to get. But understanding how to utilize that is more important. For instance, sometimes it's not the resources, but it's actually being resourceful that matters most. So whether that be a window that you have access to, a lamp that you can turn on, or any practical light source that you have access to, bring it with you, because lighting your subject will dramatically increase the quality of your footage. Like, photography literally means to capture light, and all you're doing in film is capturing frames in a second. So without good lighting, you're not going to have a high quality image. And you could achieve this by doing things like shaping the light in a practical environment so that you can get a better result, or shooting at like golden hours and different times when, you know, the lighting has more character and it looks more creative. Overall, lighting is probably one of the most important things, and try to avoid mixing color temperatures. It never really looks good. And tip number 5 would have to be audio, lenses, and accessories. I think people undermine how big of a role audio plays inside of film. For instance, you can watch a movie that's done really well, and if it has bad sound, you're not going to want to watch it. And you can watch a really crappy movie, but if it has great sound, it's still bad. And having access to the right microphones, knowing the difference between what lavs and shotguns and different audio sources are, is very important to your production. Another thing I would tell you guys is make sure to use NDs. When you're trying to lock in exposures and you're trying to compensate by changing dials that should be left alone, this is why you should just be using an ND filter to expose your footage properly, especially when you're in situations where you want to control your aperture or the depth of field in an image, and you start cranking different things like shutter and it makes your footage look really garbage. I would highly suggest, and you can get them really cheap on things like Amazon, getting one of those cases that has an ND filter built into it and putting it on top of your iPhone. And the last thing I want to hit on that I spoke about briefly at the beginning is get something like the Blackmagic app. The reason this is really good is because it allows for you to dial in settings manually that you can't access when you're actually using the native camera inside of the iPhone. And if you've ever worked with a professional camera, you know this is one of the most distinctive features that separates it from something that's amateur. Locking in these settings is what professionals always do to make sure that they have the most optimal and professional looking result, no matter what device they're using. So these are the 5 tips I wanted to leave you with in regards to filming on something like an iPhone, because I know most people have access to that. And even though they see my page and they love the stuff I do, how I actually recorded it is probably more important than the result that you guys are looking at. So for me, I think it's important to share that knowledge so that when you guys go to record something, you're not sitting there wondering why it doesn't look the same, but now you know how to actually go out and capture it. And remember, you don't need some big fancy camera like I do with my FX6 and my A7S III. You just need something that's capable, know what its limitations are, and go out there and make mistakes, but learn from them and repeat until you become a great filmmaker. Now get out there and go create. Peace.